Um, and so we'll start recording now. And so I want to introduce Duane Schoonard, Pastor Duane Schoonard, and she comes to us with 30 plus years in pastoral ministry in Georgia-Cumberland, Florida conferences. And I had to, sorry about that, in Georgia-Cumberland conference and Florida conferences. She has served 10 years as North American Division Associate Ministerial Director. Mind you, that is something that most women have not had that opportunity. So Duane, that speaks a lot for your pastoral care and your abilities as a pastor. Most recently, she's providing pastoral counseling to pastors, teachers, and their families. Duane, she has graduated from Atlantic Union College with a degree in theology and Rollins College with a master's in mental health counseling. She is also nationally certified in trauma care. And it's interesting when I was visiting with Duane and asking her if she would talk about kind of the climate that we have all experienced in the last year with COVID, year plus with COVID, and just with all the racial tension, all the mask or not to mask, there's just been all this tension. And yet as Christians, we are called to love everyone, right? And yet we all have our differences. So, living in love and holding our differences. And so that's what she will be addressing. And so if you'll just bow your head with me, I'm going to say a prayer here, asking for the Lord's presence, and then I'll turn it over to Duane. Father God, we just thank you for this wonderful time that we could be together tonight. We are excited, anticipating your presence being with us. And we ask that your presence will just work through and speak through Duane as she shares with us her study of how she is doing this presentation. And Father, we all have a need to learn how to love more deeply and to listen to others and how to respect other people's opinions. So we ask that you would be with us now. Help us to just turn our phones, the voice off, or turn them completely off so that we will not be distracted. Let us have our pen and pad and also our pen, pen, and also our Bibles, Lord, that we can use this at this time. And thank you, Father, in advance for the ministry that will take place here tonight. Amen. Duane, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Joe, and Women's Ministry team for inviting me. I'm really privileged to be with you and to share. I feel like the content or the request for this topic is really multi-layered and complex. So let me wade in, and we'll have opportunities for questions and answers and perhaps different directions as we do that. As Joe has already mentioned, we're living in a very difficult spiritual and cultural environment. Our world has been rocked by political and physical dynamics that have created existential anxiety, fear, instability, and uncertainty at levels that most of us have never experienced before. Our abilities to cope are taxed, and for many, the demand has gone beyond our emotional, spiritual, and physical resources. We have regressed to earlier stages of development and are being called upon to confront our life paradigms that are hampering our ability to meet the demands of our current situation. We long for stability and security, and there's none to be found. Literally, the air we breathe is a threat to life itself. Under the circumstances, we need new emotional, social, and spiritual paradigms out of which to operate. These new ways of being demand information, that is, knowledge and life skills, but they also demand extraordinary self-discipline, tenacity, perseverance, practice, humility, self-forgetfulness, divine resources, and courage. Of course, the limits of our time together tonight cannot contain all that we need to learn. And I want to offer first a couple of models to help us to understand each other and ourselves. And secondly, to bring spiritual perspective to the discussion as we think about what it means to live in love while holding our unique differences. So the next portion may appear disjointed a little bit and like we are talking about different things, but hang in there. In the end, I think you will see how it all fits together as we combine both the psychological, sociological, and theological pieces together. They'll fit like a puzzle. So Donna is going to put up on the screen the self-development and personal growth model that you all have received. This model was developed by Donna Jennings and gives us an understanding of what happens to us under duress, under stress, under extreme anxiety. So first, you see there at the top, there's an issue or an event, a concern that creates anxiety for us. All of us tend to have different ways of dealing with anxiety. And listed here are 4 different ways. And first, I want to look at the 3 dysfunctional ways or inadequate developmental ways that we deal with anxiety. The first is when our anxiety gets too high, beyond our ability to self-regulate, to calm ourselves down, we, some of us tend to cut off or withdraw from the other. An example of this might be when we're having conflict with our spouse, for instance. Sometimes one spouse will walk out of the room and go to their bedroom or go for a drive rather than continue to engage the conversation. They cut off or withdraw from the other person. Another attempt to get rid of anxiety is to take over the other person. If you have tendencies to control, most likely you're going to go down this path where you want to tell the other person how they're going to behave, how they need to behave. You're going to try to take over the circumstances and control your environment to lower your anxiety. The third way that we sometimes attempt to take over or get rid of our anxiety is to allow ourselves to be taken over. This is often a tendency of women, not always, but often, especially in a patriarchal society, we allow other people, other systems to take over. That way we don't have to take control, we don't have to take responsibility, we allow ourselves to be taken over. All 3 of those, as you see the arrows on the paradigm showing, all go back and feed the anxiety. They don't lower the anxiety, they just increase it. And it will raise perhaps other concerns, other issues if we go down any of those paths. So for instance, a person who cuts off or withdraws, the other person may end up feeling unloved or uncared for, or that their concern doesn't matter. And so the message being sent to to the other person in the conflict will be one, I'm not loved, I'm not wanted, I'm not valued. So if you take over, the other person is going to feel like you're a controlling, manipulative person, and will just create more stress and anxiety in the relationship and so on. So how do we, in healthy ways, get out of that anxiety cycle? How do we lower our stress? How do we get regulated again when we are under high stress? Well, that is in the fourth box there, and it's called differentiate. The way to lower anxiety is to differentiate. And the box describes what differentiation means. The first component of being able to differentiate is to maintain a sense of separate self when close to another person. In other words, what you say and do says more about you than it says about me. When someone makes an accusation or criticism, a judgment about us, that is talking about what's going on inside of them. It's not about necessarily what's going on inside of you. So if you have the paradigm that what you say and do, what another person says and does, says more about them than it says about you, you can lower your anxiety because you don't have to internalize it. You don't have to make it your problem. So that's the first thing. The second is be non-reactive to the other's reactivity. Be non-reactive to the other people's reactivity. So if their stress is going up, their anxiety is going up, and they're acting out, they're angry or whatever, you don't react. Let me give you a quick example. My son, I think, was in 8th grade. And when he came home from work and from school, it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I was in the kitchen washing dishes and getting things cleaned up from the morning dishes so that I would even have room to fix supper. He came in the door. It was summer, springtime in Florida. And his first remark to me is one of anger. Why isn't supper ready yet? It's not even supper time. As he slams the screen door behind him. Okay, what I could have done as a mother is say, you have no business talking to me like that. Go to your room until you get yourself under control. That is a reactive response to someone else's stress and anxiety. A non-reactive response, and fortunately, I was calm enough to be able to do this. I realized something was bothering him. He knew it wasn't supper time. He's just coming home from school. Why is he being so ugly and reactive as he walks in the door? Well, I found out because I was able to take a non-reactive response to him that something really ugly had happened at school. He had taken some magazines to school. So he was into mini truck magazines. And if any of you know anything about these mini truck magazines, they have poorly clad women decorating the trucks throughout the magazine. And he had taken a couple of them to school to show to his friends that were also into redoing trucks. The principal saw that, took the magazines, and asked my son to come into the office after school. When my son went into the office, he sees the principal sitting there looking through the magazines. He wasn't allowed to have the magazines. He was being punished for having the magazines, and yet he sees the principal looking at the magazines. He's angry. But he can't risk telling the principal that, and so he takes it out on his mom when he comes in. A non-reactive response allowed me to get to the story behind his reaction. If I had reacted it and sent him to his room, he never would have shared that story with me. So we must be non-reactive to the other people's reactivity. The third thing is we self-regulate our emotions so that judgment can be used. That is, calm ourselves down. Calm ourselves down so that we can think, so that we can use our heads instead of responding in a negative way. Now, sometimes it's necessary to excuse ourselves to be able to calm ourselves down enough to be able to use our judgment. And the fourth thing is tolerate this new uncomfortable feeling because it leads to growth. It gives us new data, new information to feed back into our anxiety or to the event of concern. The more we differentiate, the more we have the ability to respond appropriately under stress. Let's go to the second model, the communication model. So in every reaction or every communication between us and someone else goes through this model of communication. So everyone comes to every situation and every conversation with a specific worldview. That worldview could be culturally influenced, it could be educationally influenced, it could be the environment, the home in which you grew up, your life experiences. Your worldview is unique to yourself. No one's worldview is the same because your life experiences are different. Even if you grew up in the same family, your worldview is different because you have unique life experiences, but you also are in different positions in that family, which shapes how you think. And if any of y'all have siblings, I'm sure you've had this experience where you've been sitting around in a circle and sharing family stories, and one person's perspective of that story is totally different than another person's perspective of that same incident. So whenever two people come together, their worldviews are worlds apart. As if you're French and the other person is African American. You know, that's how different our world experiences are. So when I'm communicating, I am communicating, and you'll see that little acronym along the side, fiat. When I'm communicating out of my feelings, out of my worldview, my feelings about whatever we're talking about, my intention in communicating with you, my attitudes and thoughts about this situation. And I do that, I communicate that through my words, which are 7% of communication, my body language, which is 55% of communication, and my tone of voice, which is 38% of the communication. I communicate that to person B, and they respond their feelings, their inferences, attitudes, and thoughts. So if they're responding out of their worldview with their feelings, inferences, attitudes, and thoughts, how different can that be? That my words maybe have different meaning to them. My body language may have different meaning to them. My tone of voice may have different meanings to them. I'll give you an example that happened to me on Friday. I have a friend from Malawi who came to visit, and we were visiting with my brother and his wife, and we were outside we were looking at a tractor and talking about it and all the equipment that goes with it and everything. Well, my brother is very sensitive to the heat, and he was beginning to flush, his face getting really red, and I knew what was happening. And so when there was a break in the conversation, I said to my friend, they're cooking. You know, we better go. They're cooking. We better go. Well, get in the car, and my friend says, what are they cooking? Okay, I've already forgotten that conversation, and I'm saying, cooking. Well, it's about supper time. He says, well, my sister-in-law usually makes waffles on Friday night for supper. It wasn't until the middle of the night I'm thinking about that conversation, and I realize that he's literally being concrete. What are they cooking? And I am referring to the fact that they're getting too hot, physically hot. So the next morning I am explaining this to him. Well, when I said to them, they were too hot, that word to them meant they were getting angry. And I'm saying, no, they're not getting angry. I'm saying they were physically getting hot. But it took 3 or 4 rounds of that conversation for the word cooking, how I was using it, for them to understand what I was really saying, okay? That happens all the time in our communication. Okay, so when I have a feeling, a hurt, a pinch in a conversation, if I don't check that out, pretty soon this conversation is going to spiral downhill, because what I'm intending to communicate is being inferred in a different way. And they're going to respond based on their inference and their worldview. And so I need to slow the conversation down to make sure that we understand each other. If I don't, the conversation, as that little loop shows there at the bottom, cycles downward. So, we often, let me say, so under duress, under stress, we are more fragile. Our sensitivities are more acute. It takes more self-awareness, more differentiation to maintain emotional equilibrium. So slowing the conversation down when I feel pinched, that is hurt, is to avoid unnecessary conflict and pain. We often hurt ourselves and others when we are at the limit of our resources. People will offend us more easily, even when that was not their intention. We will be more easily offended when we feel fragile. For instance, a mother who has lost her baby, if a remark is made by someone in the congregation of God must have had some bigger plan for you, will hurt worse than if it was said under different circumstances. When we are fragile and at the end of our resources, people will offend us more easily. It's easy right now to be divided on liberal and conservative agendas, political or health-related agendas. Based on our personal worldview and life experiences, we each will be responding to these things differently. Our ability to hold each other's perspective or experience with gentle kindness rather than forcing our agenda will be more or less based on our own level of differentiation. And in addition to that, our biblical worldview. Because of our earthly existence, grounded in the reality of the world in which we live, It is easy to focus on our present reality and get bogged down in the everydayness of our lives. But there is another perspective that must inform our responses and shape how we live our lives. That perspective is a biblical worldview. There's not a person listening to my voice that does not realize we are living in the last days of this earth's history. Satan is going about seeking whom he may devour. He is particularly active among the people of God, seeking to divide and conquer, seeking to separate us from each other and from the God we love. We are on the battleground of the greatest cosmic conflict ever. It is being played out on the battlefield of your heart, on the battlefield of our homes, on the battlefield of our churches. There will be many casualties. Satan has set traps for you in the current cultural wars, in your own unresolved emotional baggage, and your loyalty to religious or spiritual traditions that you hold as gospel. If we fail to see what is going on cosmically from a biblical worldview, we can think the conflicts around us are reality, while they are only skirmishes to distract us from the real issues. To focus on whether or not a person is vaccinated or is wearing a mask, or whether or not they buy into a liberal or conservative political agenda, or a liberal or conservative religious perspective, is a skirmish, a distractor, a trap of Satan to divide and conquer. Consider with me the words of Jesus in Matthew 24, and I'm going to be reading from verse 13 on, because I want you, verse 3 on, because I want you to see the context in which he is saying these words. So Matthew 24, beginning in verse 3. Jesus sat on the Mount of Olives. His disciples came to him privately and said, "Tell us, when will all this happen? What sign will signal your return and the end of the world?" Jesus told them, "Don't let anyone mislead you, for many will come in my name, claiming I am the Messiah. They will deceive many, and you will hear of wars and threats of war, but don't panic. Yes, these things must take place, but the end won't follow immediately. Nation will go to war against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in many parts of the world. But all of this is only the first of birth pains, with more to come. Then you will be arrested, persecuted, and killed. You will be hated all over the world because you are my followers. And many will turn away from me and betray and hate each other. And many false prophets will appear and will deceive many people. Sin will be rampant everywhere, and the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved." In the long list of signs of Jesus' second coming, Jesus focuses particularly the most amount of time on this idea. Many will be offended, will betray one another, and will hate one another. Then many false prophets will rise up and deceive many, and because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. Most of the time, this passage of scripture is applied to people who are not Christians, people out in the world. And that's how I saw it until recently when I looked at the text more closely. And if we mix the context and the meaning and apply it to unbelievers, we miss the warning contained in Jesus' words. The context of which he is speaking is to his disciples, to his closest followers. The world will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. He is speaking directly to them. So who is it who will be offended? Who will be offended? Who will betray one another? Who will hate one another? We find a clue in the sentence that follows: because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. The Greek word in this verse is agape. It's not phileo, a love found among friends, but agape, the love that only comes from God. A love that is not based on performance or even whether it is returned. It is a love that gives even when it is rejected. Without God, we can only love with a selfish love, one that cannot be given if it is not received first. Agape is poured out regardless of the response. This agape is the love Jesus shed when he forgave from the cross. It is the love we each have received when we accepted him as our Savior. It is the love that he gave us to give to others. So the many Jesus is referring to here are Christians whose agape has grown cold. Another point that I think confirms that Jesus is talking about his followers is the first phrase of that sentence: because lawlessness abounds. Jesus' definition of the law is bound up in love. You know this: to love God, his definition is this: to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and body, and your neighbor as yourself. This command encompasses the whole law. In Jesus' definition, lawlessness would be a failure to love God and our neighbor. Notice what he says in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, verses 43 through 48. You have heard the law that says, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. In that way, you will be acting as true children of your Father in heaven. For he gives his sunlight to both the evil and the good, and he sends rain on the just and the unjust alike. If you love only those who love you, what reward is there for that? Even corrupt tax collectors do that much. If you are kind only to your friends, how are you different from anyone else? Even pagans do that, but you are to be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. The command to love is not given to unbelievers. It is not expected from those who have no foundation in Jesus. They cannot love with this kind of love unless God has put it in their hearts. Jesus is asking his people to operate under a different principle, the principle of agape love. We see in our passage a people whose love has grown cold. They no longer love those who treat them unfairly. In fact, their love has grown so cold, they betray each other and even hate one another. This warning of Jesus is twofold. We can be one of those whose love grows cold when we see things as gospel, as the way they're supposed to be. We are critical, demanding, and judgmental if the other doesn't see or do things the way they think they should believe and behave. So that's one side of Jesus' warning. The other side is this: we can be on the other side, and all the hurtful things people say and do to offend us can turn us cold and indifferent to others. We can withdraw our love, respect, and kindness when we are hurt, and we end up in the same trap of those who have offended us. We cannot escape the fact that both the wheat and tares grow together. We cannot escape the fact that wolves hang out with the sheep. We cannot escape the fact that we are living in a time of spiritual shaking, which is revealing our true heart and character. And on that great judgment day, the fire will reveal what kind of work each of us has built. 1 Corinthians 3, 12 through 15 is a really powerful verse. 1 Corinthians 3, 12 through 15. Anyone who builds on that foundation, that is the foundation of Christ, may use a variety of materials, gold, silver, jewels, wood, hay, or straw. But on the judgment day, fire will reveal what kind of work each builder has done. The fire will show if a person's work has any value. If the work survive, that builder may receive a reward. But if the work is burned up, the builder will suffer great loss. The builder may be saved, but like someone barely escaping a wall of flames. Paul talks about this in Colossians 3, 12 through 15. Since God chose you to be the holy people he loves, notice these words, you must clothe yourself with tender-hearted mercy, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Make allowances for each other's faults, and may I say differences, different worldviews, different perspectives, and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. Above all, clothe yourself with love, which binds us all together in perfect harmony. And let the peace that comes from Christ rule in your hearts. For as members of one body, you are called to live in peace. So it's time for us to break into our small groups. You have been provided with some questions to guide your time, and we'll come back after that for a time of question and answers and clarify anything about what I've said that you may want to talk about. Okay, see you in a few minutes.
Everyone just hang on until you get to your room, and please stay on. We want you to be part of this small group. And Donna and Heidi will be transferring us to those rooms now. Okay, everyone, you might want to switch yourself to gallery view if you're still seeing just speaker view. And I think we're there now. Yeah, Pastor Duane, she's sharing some wonderful material, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just wave your hands or write something in the chat there. But we're going to have opportunity to go through some questions together and just discuss. And so just to remind you, those of you who are in this chat room or this breakout room, so we are recording this particular one. So just remember that if you want to share something that's a personal story, that's fine. But just remember it will be recorded. And so just be aware of that, okay? And so we want you to be comfortable. So, you know, living in love, holding differences. And before we start into the first question, I would just like to get a little feedback from at least a few of you on what has struck you most, or what is something that you actually wrote down a note about. I mean, I'm sure all of us will go back and listen to this again, but what is something that that really struck you that maybe you hadn't thought about before?
I'd like to say when someone makes a comment or they lash out and they're really talking about themselves and it's not really you.
Very good that you picked up on that. Yes, that, remember that when people lash out, they're probably just, it's their issue, not yours. So, and that should help us, by remembering that should help us to be more reactive or active to a situation.
Active.
Yes.
Definitely not reactive.
Act instead of react. Okay. Yeah. Anyone else want to share just a little nugget or something that you're thinking, wow, I'm going to try to work on this area of my life because I know it needs, you know, some improvement there.
Can I speak?
Yes.
One of the things that I wrote down from the very beginning was learning to live and love while holding our unique differences. That phrase itself spoke to me quite a bit. I guess because we don't really realize how different we are sometimes, that, you know, that everybody is so different, that everybody has unique differences, our beliefs, and that we have to learn to love through all those things. And people ought to be able to see that love.
That's good. I like that comment. Is there one more comment people might make? And then we're going to go into some questions here.
I just wanted to mention that when we talk about differences, we often think that somehow one idea is above the other, but when we look at it from God's perspective, he understands all those, you know, the fiat, the feelings, the intentions, the attitudes and thoughts, and he respects each and every one of us. When we look at Jesus's life, he has come across many different kinds of people with many different kinds of backgrounds. And yet he was able to talk to that person. I'm thinking of the Samaritan woman right now, with such gentleness and kindness and respect, even though, you know, her theology was off. And eventually she realized that. But God does not put any one of our ideas up of the other. He comes straight to the heart, and with gentleness and kindness, and that's what I see in the gospel.
Yeah, I like what you said, Ida. He does come to us with gentleness of heart. Well, I'm going to dive into the first question. So we're going to look at a text here. And if you find the text, can you just raise your hand and I'll call on you to read that text, and then we'll ask the question from there. So the first text that we're going to turn to is Romans 13, verses 8 through 10. So Romans 13, verses 8 through 10. Does someone have that? Shireen, let's hear from you.
Okay, Romans 13, 8 through 10. Owe no one anything except to love one another. For he who loves another has fulfilled the law. For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not covet. And if there is any other commandment, are all summed up in this saying, namely, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law.
Yeah, thank you for reading that text. So as she's read that text, and I know all of us had our Bibles open following her reading on that. So the question is this. So you might want to give it just a minute or two or second to think it through. But the question is, share an experience where in the midst of suffering, difficulty, or stress, someone did or said something that made you feel loved and cared for. So I'm going to read that again. So share an experience where in the midst of suffering, difficulty, or stress, someone did or said something that made you feel loved or cared for. I like this statement here.
I remember when my son was a toddler and it was just a bad day. And I found a message put on a refrigerator that my husband put on there, a quote about God's tenderness towards moms and what they were dealing with raising their children. And it that was so encouraging to me that it really touched me. So that was my husband just showing some understanding and love towards me to encourage during that time.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because your son is not little, right? Now, right?
Yeah, no, he's almost
Right.
26 now.
Yeah, I thought so. And yet, did you catch the emotion that she still has on that? How much encouragement was brought to her at that moment? So that's beautiful what you shared there. Appreciate that. Does someone else have where someone did or said something that made you feel loved or cared for when you were in the midst of suffering or difficulty or a large amount of stress?
Donna, I'm sure many of us have received this, but what came to my mind, I was just thinking that, as a women's ministry coordinator for many years and having been part of, our elders at our church, I feel that it is often, my duty or my work to reach out and to encourage and to uplift, And so what touches me, personally, especially, is when I get a note, and I recently gotten one, a handwritten note, and just simply say that I appreciate what you do. That really encourages me, because sometimes, when we put other people, when I put our ministry in the forefront, people may forget that you also need encouragement as a leader. And so I just really appreciate, and I always feel very touched when, and there is one note particularly that came to my mind. The Sabbath school teachers of our young adult group a few years ago took time to write little notes to people that have touched them in some way. And I don't know, because they made it anonymous, they didn't, they just wrote it, but name wasn't there. But this one young person wrote me such a sweet note. And I was in the middle of a battle. I was in a personal battle, and knowing, and it was actually relating to a relationship, in my family with a young person, and having that young person write that note, it was like God's handwritten note to me. I never forget that.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Anyone else want to share? If not, we'll move on. We're going to move to Romans 2, verses 1 through 4. So Romans 2, verses 1 through 4. And if you find it, just raise your hand. Okay, Valoris, would you like to read that text?
Okay, Romans 2, 1 through 4.
Correct, yes.
Okay. You may think you can condemn such people, but you are just as bad and you have no excuse. When you say they are wicked and should be punished, you are condemning yourself. For you who judge others do these very same things, and we know that God in his justice will punish anyone who does such a thing. Since you judge others for doing these things, why do you think you can avoid God's judgment when you do the same things? Don't you see how wonderfully kind, tolerant, and patient God is with you? Does this mean nothing to you? Can you see that his kindness is intended to turn you from your sin?
Ouch. That's pretty directive, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. So this text here, then the question is, it's a two-part question here. So what does it mean? The kindness of God leads to repentance. And then the other question is, how can we apply this characteristic of God to our relationships? So let's try the first one first, okay? What does it mean? The kindness of God leads to repentance.
He loved us first. For he first loved us. I mean, it is only God's love that draws us. That's what touches our heart. That's what leads us to realize our own unworthiness, and that's what brings us to the cross.
I think that's God's choice of tool to draw us to him, is his love, that he is love. So that is basically the only tool he can and is successful with, is love.
Anything else is based on fear, and God does not operate on the basis of fear. You know, perfect love casts out all fear. So if God wasn't doing it kindly, then it would be, you know, because, you know, repent or else. But that's not how God leads us.
Do we want to hear from, I mean, I would like to hear from others.
God's kindness is a part of his character, and his character is love. And so his love shows us that that's just what it is. He shows us just how much he loves us. That's what it is that leads us to repentance. It's love.
I like that. Joy, you were getting ready to say something too. You want to share that now?
Yes. When we are looking at ourselves, seeing God and seeing his kindness, seeing his beauty, seeing his all of the things that are so good, when we have even just the smallest inkling or desire to be like him, it makes us want to turn away from, or to put away, or to allow him to burn off those things that are, you know, separating us, so that we don't have anything that keeps us away from him, but it just draws us to closer to him. And it draws us to repentance, because we say, you know what, God, you are so good. I am not, but because of your sacrifice, because of your offering, I can be something better and something more. And so it brings out like something like I don't know, people who use charcoal, activated charcoal, brings out the poisons, and it just draws it out so nicely. This is how God does when we come into his presence and come into contact with his love. It just draws out the poisons, the things that are in us that are separating us.
Yeah, I think that's right, Joy. You know, it makes me think of when we truly spend time praying about and reading in the Bible and in other places where we can get a broader view of what Scripture is saying. The kindness of God is like when you fully understand the sacrifice that has been made. I'm just going to say personally, when we personally understand that, it's almost like it compels me to, when you realize the kindness and the love that God had for me to die for my sins, that really compels me to repentance. Like, who am I? Who am I that you would do that for me? And it also, in my love for him and my appreciation of what he has done, it makes me want to be a better version of myself, the version that he's called me to be, and to extend that to someone else. So I guess it's like, you know, if you're having a bad day or something or whatever, and you're thinking, you know, woe is me, and then you see someone else and it's like, you know, don't be woe is me, pass on his joy to someone else. Remember the joy in your heart for what he has done for you. And so I think that's really good. The second part of the question is, how can we apply this characteristic of God to our relationships? You know, and we all have our relationships at different levels, right? So I'm going to ask especially to the relationships of, I'm going to say family and close friends, because often those are the ones where, you know, we can be a little owly with at times, you know. So how would this knowledge, not only head knowledge, but heart knowledge, how can we apply this characteristic of God to our relationships? What do you think?
I'll share again because we've been studying about this in our women's group and looking at, you know, we've been talking about the power of a woman's words, but looking in our lives, even in our group this morning, we're looking at being a fountain versus a drain, you know, that God comes into us and we're just overflowing and it comes, you know, it just pours out of us and we're able to pour into someone else. When we're drained, we're taking, and there's no, you know, you don't see the source, you don't see it, it just pulls and pulls and pulls. And just having this something that's so good, you know, you have anything that's great in your life, you want to tell somebody about it. I think we don't always apply that in our Christian walk. You know, God has helped me to be able, even at this second right now, where I'm just having had to deal with some issue at work. And God has told me, this is what I want you to do. I've got to follow it. I've got to handle it, deal with it, though I don't want to be quiet about it in the issue part. But he's saying, but I want you not to be quiet about the praise part. So I want you to tell somebody what I've done for you. So that's it. So I'm praising him because he's done a mighty work. He has helped for me to change and to grow.
Well said, Joy. Well said. Is there anyone else who wants to make a comment on that question? Yes, Dolores. You'll need to unmute yourself. Dolores, there you go.
There I am. Okay, you know what I've learned over the years is that that thing where people don't always understand who we are. But I've also learned in the past couple of years how much we need to go to prayer before we do anything and let God go in front of us. You know, you know, I'm learning now through my love for Jesus Christ that I have to be in prayer before I talk to people. I have to be in prayer before I approach people. I have to be in prayer when I say things. And I know it's very difficult sometimes to be there, but I am learning how to have a different kind of relationship with God right now. It used to be that, you know, we just did Bible study, we went to church, we did this, we did this. It seems like those were just the things we do. Now I'm saying, when I get ready to talk to you, I have to be in prayer. I have to let God go before me so that you can see him in me. And it's a difficult thing to remember that, but it has served me well lately. Not to go into anything by myself, to always go with God.
I like that. I really like that. We have one more question. We've got a little bit of time. So I'd like us to go to Romans 14. We're still in the book of Romans. And let's turn to 14. And Who would like to read the first set of verses I'm going to give? Just raise your hand if you want to read those verses and I'll tell you what they are. So raise your, if you're, okay, Marlene, I'm going to give you those verses. You'll need to unmute yourself. And you're going to do Romans 14, verses 1, 10. I can just tell you as you're reading. You want me to do that?
Okay.
Yeah, so start with verse 1.
Receive one who is weak in the faith, but not the disputes over the doubtful things.
Verse
Okay,
10.
10.
Verse 10. Mhm.
But why do you judge your brother? Or why do you show contempt for your brother? For we shall all stand before the judgment seat of Christ.
And 13.
Therefore, let us not judge one another anymore, but rather resolve this, not to put a stumbling block or a cause to fall in our brother's way.
And verse 19, Marlene.
Therefore, let us pursue the things which make for peace, and for the things that which one may edify another.
Okay, thank you very much. And then we're going to, or at least in my Bible, turn the page over to Romans 15. And who would like to read those verses? You can just raise your hand if you would like to read those verses. Or if your picture isn't showing. Okay, Shireen. It's going to be Romans 15. And we're going to look at verses 1, 3, and 7.
Okay, Romans 15, verse 1. We then, who are strong, ought to bear with the scruples of the weak and not to please ourselves. Verse 3. For even Christ did not please himself, but as it is written, the reproaches of those who reproached you fell on me. Verse 7. Therefore, receive one another, just as Christ also received us, to the glory of God.
Thank you.
Mhm.
The question is this, ladies. What does it mean to bear the weaknesses of others and to accept one another? What does it mean to bear the weaknesses of others and to accept one another? Yes, Marlene? Marlene, were you going to say something or no? Okay, you're no?
Okay, I was reading this. Anyway, I was just thinking, even kind of like what we said a while ago, though, we don't know what they are going through.
Mhm.
And we just have to be patient and try to think of what we can do to encourage them. But we really don't know what problems they are having. That why should we think that we are better than they are?
I like that. Who are we to be better? Is there another comment? And there's one more part of this question. Dolores, were you going to say something?
No.
Okay, I just saw your little square light up. So anyone else want to say something?
Sorry, Joe, but I'm going to say something.
That's all right.
I know, but I have, over the many years, I have two instances in my head right now, but where, it was a direct conflict. Somebody came to me and accused me of something that was not my intention at all. Okay. And it happens. If you are a leader in a church, it happens.
Mhm.
And, I was not prepared for that. I came into the ministry with, all goodwill. And so I was just, I didn't know what to do. But I remember this one occasion, there was a lady who just started visiting after the evangelistic series. And I don't know exactly, like this lady was saying earlier, we have no idea where they're coming from, but I was teaching Sabbath school and she stormed in and asked a question. And it was not related to the lesson at all. It was completely off. And I told her that I would be happy to talk to her, after church, because it was seemed like a personal issue. Anyway, long story short, she said something really, really mean to me in front of everybody there. And so, it was hard to finish the lesson, but I did, and we went on. And then when I talked to her, I really felt like I was attacked, and yet I said, Lord, help me, help this woman and help me. Well, within 5 minutes, just keeping calm, as we learned today, and not to react, I was able to realize, where this question was coming from. And it had to do with actually suicide, which is a really, deep issue. But anyway, we ended up praying. I asked her if I could pray for her, and that God will bring peace and all that. And so instead of reacting and feeling like I didn't do anything, where this is coming from. And in fact, my husband wanted to jump in and say something. He was sitting next to me, and he wanted to be so protective of me, and I was like, I had to put my hand on his leg, just it's okay, I can handle, just don't say anything, because I knew she was so new. She was just really coming to the church for a short time. I said, anything reactive would say, it would just really hurt her, or just discourage her. So while I was finishing up the lesson, I was just praying. I said, Lord, help me to know what to do. Yes, I was hurt by her comments, but at that point, I felt like this worse, I had to be bearing with her where she was at that moment, to be able to. And then after we prayed, she could just physically feel her body relaxing and just, coming to, I guess, to a more, peaceful place than where she was before.
Yeah, that was a good comment. And you may have, so Ida has kind of answered this next segment of this question for our third question here. But if others of you, we have just a couple minutes left here. Can you give an example? So she has given an example, but maybe there's someone else of how you have been hurt by the insensitivity of another's response to your weakness or life situation. What would have been more helpful, understanding, or supportive? What would have built you up? So do you want to share a situation of something that happened, and what would have built you up if it had been approached or handled a different way? Marlene?
I remember it was not too long after my husband passed away. And I went to church, with a church, and some lady came up to me who wasn't a member of our church. I knew her though. And she came up to me and she said, well, now you're a widow like the rest of us. And that was so hurting, because I had never, at that point, I had not come to the idea that I was a widow now, even though, and I don't know really what would have been nice if she'd have said it. Of course, I think if she'd have said nothing would have made me feel a little bit better. But that was something that I just, I've always tried to be extra careful about using the name widow in front of somebody now.
Very, very good.
Maybe she could have said something that me now feel how you feel, instead of you feeling how they feel, because they've been
right.
in your
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, I think they're going to move us back to the main session now. And so we've had some good discussion, and you all are deep thinkers in answering these texts here in our discussion time. And so we're going to go back to in session with Pastor Duane here, and the others will be joining us as well. Dawn, I think you can go ahead and start.
Okay.
They should be joining again in just a moment.
Oh, they have, okay. Thank you, Donna.
Okay, so what are some of the questions you have about what we've talked about?
So you can just raise your hand and we can call on you, or you can write the question in the chat.
Dolores raised her hand.
My question was this: from in the beginning, one of the things that we were, one of the things that was being discussed is about the anxiety when we were talking about event or issues or concerns and anxieties, and it says, and the comment was, what a person says is sometimes more about them than it is you. Okay, so what is give me I want an example, for instance, or something like that.
Well, simple. So like my son, that was an example of that. Something was going on with him that had nothing to do with me, but I became the recipient of his anger.
Okay.
Okay, so that's an example. Sometimes, there's a little thing on Facebook. I've kind of been amused by it, where there's a little old lady rocking in a rocking chair. It looks like a person perhaps from Appalachia, and she says, "Those doing the accusing are usually the ones doing the doing." So oftentimes people are really critical of others when it is something that really is going on inside of them. They're struggling with an issue and they become critical of you or judgmental of you around that same issue that they're struggling with. It's their response to whatever's going on. It's from their worldview, their inference, their attitudes, their thoughts that they're responding to a situation. And so they're coming out of that paradigm, out of that way of thinking. And yes, you may have done something to trigger that. You have even hurt them. But there's a way for them to approach you about that hurt and that pain that doesn't put you down, that doesn't criticize you. Yeah, so that's basic. Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
For those of you that were in the other breakout room may not have heard, right now, Pastor Duane is taking questions from either your discussion time that you just had or from the material that she has shared with us so far. So if you have any questions for her, you can write it in the chat, or you may as well verbalize it. It's fine. We're a small enough group here.
Well, one of the things that I want to say, Joe, around the questions, in the discussion, people can't grow in an environment of criticism or judgment. So often we come at people slamming them or putting them down or sending them a message that what you think or believe or how you're dressing or, 1,000 things, criticizing you. People are never going to change in that environment. And, and that's, I think that's one of the points that I wanted to make about the kindness of God. There's no condemnation that comes from the voice of God. And this is an important principle. Whenever the tone is accusatory, know that it is the voice of Satan. Whether it comes through your spouse or your child or a fellow church member or someone in the community, know that it is the voice of Satan. Jesus' voice, as I've heard one of Dr. Allender, Dan Allender say, is forever kind. His voice is forever kind. We don't grow in an environment of criticism. Satan is the accuser of the brethren. It's not Jesus.
That was a very powerful statement you just made.
Thanks.
I would like to say that in the model of differentiation, the step about being non-reactive, I have always kind of seen myself as a person who did not fight and scream and all of those other things. If there was a disagreement or something, that I was pretty level-headed. But I found that I was being taken as weak, as opposed to trying to portray what Christ wanted me to be like. And that presented a problem for me, both at work and at home, frankly. And I thought, there's something about this that I'm not doing right. And I changed. I actually changed, and I started speaking up for myself. Not that I was mousy, that's not who I was, but I would say my piece, but not in a way that would make me seem as though I was, being either dictatorial or argumentative. But that's how I realized that people saw me.
Yes, you can come when you silence your voice. Does not mean that you're being non-reactive. You actually could be being reactive, but doing the withdrawing or cutting off or closing down. So one of the things that I try to teach clients is have a soft startup. When you need to bring up an issue or a concern or address something, have a soft startup. How can you do that in the kindest way possible? And with a healthy tone, without an attitude. So yes, that's a differentiated stance.
I think Sandra, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yes, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if it's really related with everything that you have been talking about, but maybe yes. I have been dealing with a family member who is very dear to me, and most of the time she takes things too personal, and she changes her moody all the time and misunderstand things that has been said in different way, but she understands the way that the way that she gets in her mind. And so she has this change of moods, like go up and down, like every week most of the time. And I have having very difficult time to deal with that. Most of the time I stay quiet but it hurts sometimes, and I just talked to my husband about it. And so I don't know if I have to be forgiving this person all the time, because I usually don't talk about it. But it seems like it's a barrier between sometimes, because that's so. And I really don't know what to do. I pray. This is what I do all the time. I just pray about it. Just pray, pray, pray. And then I'm like, God, when this thing is gonna finish, stop. I mean, because it has been hurting me and my husband a lot.
Well, yeah, I would have to know more about your story, Sandra, and know the details of the situation to give an adequate response. It sounds complicated and hurtful. Sometimes it's necessary with a person who's erratic in their moods and behavior to have healthy boundaries. It's not good for you if you're being burned to keep putting your hand back on the stove. But so if this person is hurting you all the time, what kind of boundaries do you have to have so that that pain can stop? That doesn't mean that you're unkind, but it does mean, let me put it this way. It doesn't mean that you're nice. It means that the best thing you may be doing for them is the kindest thing, and that's not tolerating the abuse. So, I think that's a scenario that, I would definitely have to have more information, but it sounds like a place where you're continuing to get hurt on a repeated basis. And so what kind of boundaries do you need to have with that person to have a healthy response?
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Maybe one day we could talk and then you could understand better my situation. But most of the time I have been praying. That's what have been doing, just praying and then asking God for transformation, for conversion,
Yes.
And so that's what I'm doing right now. But thank you for your help.
Yes.
We can take maybe one more comment and then we'll move on here with, is there one more comment or question? Shireen?
Duane, somebody taught me, like in the Beatitudes, how Jesus didn't say be a peacekeeper. He said be a peacemaker. Maybe you want to address that and kind of explain how you see that for each of us, how to be peacemakers and not peacekeepers necessarily.
Yes. Jesus himself was, he's called a peacemaker, but how did he do that? He didn't just brush things over. He didn't just cover things up. He didn't ignore issues, but he worked for reconciliation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes he had to do that. His longing, for instance, with the Pharisees, his longing for the Pharisees was to have a relationship with them. But he said some very strong words to them. He called them vipers. He called them whited sepulchres. He called them some pretty strong names. But it was so that they could see what the issue is. If you doing the nice thing is not always the kind thing. Sometimes speaking the truth in love is the most caring thing you can do. That's the only way true reconciliation or true peace can come in a relationship.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, Duane, you might want to maybe do the ending of your presentation, and then ladies, hold on. I just want to share just something that's coming up in August that I want you to participate in, and we're really excited, but we want to hear from Duane.
I want to close with a story. This story, when I read it, I just felt like it encapsulated what we're to be about. So this is the story. The commander of the occupation troops said to the mayor of a mountain village, "We know you're hiding a traitor. Unless you give him up to us, we shall harass you and your people by every means in our power." The village was indeed hiding a man who seemed good and innocent and was loved by all. But what could the mayor do now that the welfare of the village was at stake? Days of discussion in the village council led to no conclusion. So the mayor finally took the matter up with the spiritual leaders. The spiritual leaders and the mayor spent a whole night searching the scriptures and finally came up with a text that said, "It is better that one man die to save the nation." So the mayor handed over the innocent man, whose screams echoed through the village as he was tortured and put to death. Several years later, a prophet came to that village, went right up to the mayor and said, "How could you have done this? That man was sent by God to be the savior of this country, and you handed him over to be tortured and killed." "Where did a guy do wrong?" pleaded the mayor. "The spiritual leaders and I looked at the scriptures and did what they commanded." "That's where you went wrong," said the prophet. "You looked only at the scriptures. You should have also looked into his eyes." I think that when we hide behind our spiritual dogmas, our perspectives, our criticisms, and fail to see the heart and eyes of another person, we have just failed them. As one person said in the group, we never know what pain, what story another person is living in the time that we interact with them. What we may perceive on the outside is only the outside. Unless we can look into their eyes and look into their heart and know their story, we have no right to lift up one word of accusation or criticism against them. Let's learn to live in love while honoring, respecting, cherishing, actually, each other's differences.
That was really powerful, Pastor Duane. Let's bow our heads in prayer here, and then I'll just share one more thing with you. Father God, we thank you for this time that we could come together and learn, Father, how important it is for us to really listen to others, to differentiate when we are finding ourselves in conflict in a conversation with others, and truly always to be asking the question, what would your reaction be? How would you handle this situation? How would you act instead of react? So help us to be mindful, help us to ponder on the things that we have learned tonight, so that this just isn't a seminar that we can say we listened to. Let us go back and listen to it again and help us to learn, each of us, what we need to know to be a better version of ourselves, for us to show to the world, Father, that we may show them you and you only, is my prayer in Jesus' name, amen. Well, this has been a really good meeting time. I'm excited you all stayed on, and what great discussions we had. You are really a thought deep thinking group, and you're not afraid to speak up. So kudos to you for that. One thing I wanted to share with you is that we will not be doing any virtual midweek meetings. The Bible study on Monday night is going to continue for the women by Ann Trumbo, and then also the teenagers are having a Bible study on Friday nights, and that will continue. We are going to take a little break in the months of June and July, but in August, we have been invited to be part of the Southern Union virtual tour of women's ministry. So each conference has been given a month where they will highlight their conference. In August 8th is the month that Georgia-Cumberland will be highlighting, showcasing what we do in women's ministries, not just what we do at the conference, more importantly, what you are doing out in your community, out in your church. And I would really would like to have you be part of this. So if you are interested in being part of this virtual presentation, we're going to be inviting women from all over Southern Union, and actually it's going to be on Facebook Live to see this is what's happening in Georgia-Cumberland Conference. This is how we reach out to others in our church and in the community. Then if you could put up that information, Donna, that they would need to know on this. But we would really love to have, and that will be our meeting for July. So again, it happens on Sunday, August 8th. It won't be on a Tuesday. It will be on a Sunday, August 8th in the afternoon. And we'll get more details to you in just a week or two. But if you would like to showcase what women's ministries in your church is doing, please contact me. It has my information there, or call me at this number no later than June 16, because Donna and I and the team need to put together the presentation on how it will go. We are not going to wing it that night, but we'd sure like to hear from you. Even if we're going to show a little video or pictures and put it in a quick video, we want you to be involved in this. So with that said, think it over and let us hear from you. Be part of what's happening in Georgia-Cumberland Conference. This is a conference where God has blessed women's ministry tremendously, and it would not have happened without your support and your involvement. So let us all share the story together. Thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to hearing from you, and we'll see you again on August 8th. Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your participation, everyone.
Thank you. Good to see you all.
Good to see you, Marlene. All right. I think we're going to close down the meeting now. So we'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.